Hello, everyone. My name is Minister Janae Bates. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the communications director with Yes for Minneapolis. And today we are going to talk about why we're excited and we want you to be excited to go and vote yes on City Question 2. And you can vote today, well, or you can make a plan to vote today. But no matter what, we need you to vote by November 2nd. All right. And so we're going to talk about why that's incredibly important and an incredibly important action to take. So we know that in the city of Minneapolis, there is currently a system that actually hasn't been working for most people. And the reality is that when crisis happens, there's only one kind of response in the current system, and that means that that is an armed police response. And so what voting yes on question 2 does is it now opens the options and allows for an entire range of different qualified professionals to be at the ready, to give a right-sized response to meet the needs of the people of Minneapolis. Because currently we're asking Minneapolis police officers to do way too many things. We want them to be counselors and social workers and homeless outreach and crisis interveners, when the reality is there are qualified and trained people and experts and professionals out there who do that job and do it really well. And so we should make sure that we have those kinds of resources at our hands, at the ability to be able to be deployed and to work alongside police officers, to work in consortium with them into a comprehensive and integrated department. And there's only one way to do that. And that means we have to vote yes. And so when we're telling you all to vote yes, we want to tell you why it's really important to. And the reality is, in the city of Minneapolis, people are able and deserve to have a series of things. One, to move away from an armed police only response, to directly address the issues of violence in community, and to do that now. Not to go and create another focus group, create another research project, do another study. We've been doing that. That has happened for many, many years, if not decades at this point. We actually get to start to really tackle those big problems now. And doing so allows us to get to the root of violence and crime and decrease it over time. This Department of Public Safety allows us to embrace a holistic model of public safety, which means that it is completely dedicated to the whole person, allowing humanity and dignity to be at the core. And in order to have that, we get to fund and resource and support trained, qualified professionals. In this department, we get citywide representation and accountability with those who protect and serve. And then last, but certainly not least, we get to do all of this. We get to have this kind of reform done in a racially equitable way. Now, all of that sounds great, I'm sure you're saying or thinking to yourself. This is exactly what we want, and I don't feel this manifested right now. I'm not understanding why we don't have it. So we have to talk about how we got here to the place where it's absolutely necessary and why we still don't have it. Which means we got to talk about the big blue elephant in the room, and that is the Minneapolis Police Department, the container that currently holds police officers for Minneapolis. MPD is the poster child for reform. They have had reforms on everything from trainings on de-escalation, implicit bias trainings, mental health trainings. They have implemented body camera usage. They have had a series of attempts at civilian oversight of MPD, which have either been proven ineffective or have been completely dismantled by the Police Federation over time. The U.S. Department of Justice has made several interventions with MPD, one in 93, another in 2016, and they are conducting one right now in 2021. there have been many reform-minded police chiefs who have been committed to making big changes, big cultural, institutional changes within the department. Folks like Tony Boza, Janae Harteau, and even the current police chief, Chief Arredondo. And yet the problem has remained. The Minneapolis Police Department has continued to be resilient against these changes. And so last year, all of us witnessed a 9-minute murder. And when that happened, people across race, across income, across region, across gender, across ideology, they filled the streets and they lifted up their voices courageously. And they said, you know what, we cannot allow this to keep happening. We recognize for sure that Black lives do in fact matter. And so in that recognition of connecting all of our humanity to one another and making that proclamation that Black Lives Matter, the people of Minneapolis chose to make that proclamation a policy. And so they used the vehicle of Yes for Minneapolis to do that. And so Yes for Minneapolis is a coalition of residents, small businesses, organizations, educators, survivors, elected officials, families, folks all across the city who are ready and excited to say yes, who are ready and excited to raise the standard of public safety, to expand public safety in the city of Minneapolis. And so you just see a very small snippet along your right-hand side of the organizations that have been committed and are dedicated and are working to make this dream of expanded public safety an actual reality for the people of Minneapolis. You also see in that upper right corner, the handful of folks who have been working really, really hard in order to block this from happening. They have really decided that instead, they would like to consolidate the power and the resources of the city and funnel them to the Police Federation, because that has been the group of people who's really held on and gets to dictate what public safety looks like. And so we'll talk a little bit more about how that's worked out, because all of us, I'm sure, already feel how that has manifested. And so what does saying yes on question 2, what does that actually do? I am so glad you asked. The reality is that question 2 would replace the current container that Minneapolis currently has called the Minneapolis Police Department with a Department of Public Safety. And so the Department of Public Safety will change the current armed police only model of public safety to instead be rooted in a public health approach, to be both proactive and responsive. It allows the city to include a mix of different strategies, wide-ranging strategies, and different types of staff, like those trained mental health workers, like crisis specialists, like emergency responders, like homeless outreach, like substance abuse crisis responders. And we also get to have police officers, and we use them when necessary. And I do know that for some, it has given a tinge of hesitation that we name if necessary, when necessary. But the reality is that's how we should steward all of our resources. Being good stewards of your resource should actually be celebrated, that we are making sure that we use police officers in the well-trained, well-disciplined, accountable, and transparent approach that police officers, armed police officers, should be used in. And as many police officers, including the current Chief Arredondo, have stated over and over again, they're getting called into issues where law enforcement actually shouldn't be. And that is the majority of the calls they receive. And so what we want to do is make sure that we're actually sending the right size response. And by voting yes on question 2, we get to have that. That allows us to have flexibility in staffing and budgeting to meet the city's needs, their safety needs, which aren't currently being met. And again, this allows us to have a transparent and accountable relationship that has citywide representation. Now, what do I mean by citywide representation? Well, let's talk about the way that the Minneapolis Police Department is currently set up. Currently, this department is an anomaly. And what I mean by that is every single department in the city charter is set up in the way in which you see on your right-hand side, where there is the mayor and the city council, They work together to nominate and appoint a department commissioner. That department commissioner then is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the department. They are the ones who will manage and have leadership of that department. Now, the benefit of this model is that you get full citywide representation. And that works out very well because city council members represent a group of their people. In Minneapolis, about 30,000 people, whereas the mayor is over 400,000. The other thing in the city of Minneapolis, which unfortunately, though being a really abundant city, has an incredibly stark issue with racial disparities. And this plays out in a whole series of things, from healthcare to wages to housing, but also to democracy. And so the city of Minneapolis is positioned in a way in which a mayor only technically needs to govern a handful of wards and still win their seat. The reality is city council members don't function that way. They need to win their entire ward, which means that they are accountable to those folks in their ward. And so having a department that is actually set up that allows that citywide representation gives folks the opportunity and the ability to have much more say about what keeps them safe than the current system that really is just funneled to the mayor and the police chief. The other thing that we know about the way that this is played out in the city of Minneapolis currently is that when you have a situation where the mayor is the head of what we call, or in the city charter, has unilateral and complete control of the police department, it has actually siloed out much of the city from being able to have access, decision-making, transparency with not just the police department, but in general public safety. And so we want to align the Department of Public Safety to be like all the other city departments in the charter. And so here is what your ballot looks like, folks who live in Minneapolis. You will have this beautiful ballot that has 3 questions on it. And today, we, of course, have been talking about question number 2 for the Department of Public Safety. So, of course, we want you to make sure that you're filling in that great guess, because this, again, is really about expanding expanding public safety across the city of Minneapolis, most certainly raising the standard of public safety. Now, the other thing about raising the standard of public safety, that means that we want you to also consider voting yes on question 3. We know that it is a necessity for people to have stable housing. That is one of the many things when we're talking about a comprehensive, complete, holistic way for people to be safe. We know that folks having a stable place to live now and for future generations to come, that is an important piece of being safe. And so we want you to vote yes on question 3. And then lastly, when we're talking about the very particular and ways in which questions 2 and 3 got on this ballot, it was led by the people of Minneapolis. Both of these questions were put on here because the people of Minneapolis said it is time that we raise the standard of public safety. It is time that people have a say about where they live and the conditions of which they live and their ability to afford where they live. What we know about question 1 is this was actually created by an unelected body of people that actually waters down and weakens the ability for question 2 and 3 to be implemented to the fullest and most robust possible way for the people of Minneapolis. And so when it comes to this idea of mayoral control, that actually would make it far more like all of the city departments to have the same structure that I mentioned before with in the previous slide, where all of those city departments would actually be like the current Minneapolis Police Department. And just to remind you all, the current Minneapolis Police Department is the only department in the city that does not have full citywide representation, but is actually under mayoral control. It is also the only department that is getting national headlines of abuse and mistrust and sometimes murder. And so we are definitely saying folks should probably put a big no on that one. But again, we're saying no to question 1, yes to question 2, and yes to question 3. All right, so very briefly, how will question 2 be put into practice? I am so glad you asked. Question 2 is the only concrete plan to have the Department of Public Safety. And that plan requires that in that first 30 days of transition, that the mayor and the city council will nominate and appoint an interim Department of Public Safety commissioner, as we mentioned before. Now, then after they have that, they get to have a data-driven and community engagement process in order to establish the right number of officers and right number of qualified professionals, including police, again, into this department. They also get to establish a budget that properly supports the qualified professionals that will be a part of the department. This transition is going to take time, right? This is really about making sure that we are fully integrating community, that community gets to have a say, which unfortunately isn't happening right now, but after voting yes, that's what takes place. And because Yes for Minneapolis it's a Black-led, though multiracial, multi-generational organization, we want to prioritize the communities that are the hardest and first impacted around public safety, who also coincidentally have the least say right now. And so when we're thinking about wards 4 and 5, for example, North Minneapolis, these places absolutely need to be a part of the conversation and part of the creation and development about who's going to be in their neighborhoods, who's going to be the people that they can call when crisis happens, who are the folks they can trust to show up when they need them. And sometimes that will be an armed police officer, sometimes it'll be a mental health specialist, sometimes it'll be a combination, but they get to have a say about that. And so while that transition takes place, the police department will continue to function in its day-to-day response and patrol until there can be a full and smooth integration of those police officers from the current Minneapolis Police Department into the Department of Public Safety. They get to have that, and no matter how long that transition period is in place. There is currently an ordinance in place because of good governance. An ordinance already exists. It has existed for many, many decades that will allow the city of Minneapolis to retain a police response every single step of the way, every stage of the transition. And we'll also pop in the link for you where you can read the ordinance for yourself. And so I just want to show you again, kind of like the timeline, if you will, of this implementation. And I want to be clear that the beautiful thing about this plan is that it prioritizes the safety of community, most certainly prioritizes those who are the hardest and first impacted, and it gets to move at the pace of the city. So the fact that you really want to make sure that community is engaged every single step of the way, I cannot stress that enough. We want to make sure that folks get to have a say. That's the beautiful thing about getting to say yes. Now, why do we need this charter change? Can't we do this without that? You're starting to probably already hear a little bit of those talking points from the mayor, who agrees that all these things should happen, except the piece where he doesn't get to have unilateral complete control. But the reality is that no, and we know that this is the reality, that no, we actually can't do this without the charter change, because if we could, we would have already done it. I mean, the mayor's been in place for 4 years now, and if he could have done it, I'm sure he would have, right? So let's talk about why we don't currently have it and why we absolutely have to change the charter to make it happen. So in the city of Minneapolis, we got to do a little bit of history first. In 1961, the mayor of that time and the police federation of that time struck a deal. And unfortunately, this deal rigged the rules against the residents of Minneapolis and didn't put at the forefront the safety of those in the city. And that deal was essentially that if the mayor could have unilateral control of the police department, so that was their cut of the deal, then the police federation got to put what is equivalent to a police federation contract into the city's constitution, into the city charter. And so Minneapolis is an anomaly in that it is the only city in the entire state of Minnesota that has this, that has what's equivalent to a police federation contract in their city charter. So that means for the past 60 years, Minneapolis has been locked into a armed police only response that also equates to about 35% of the city's annual budget. It goes directly into armed police only and allows no flexibility for us to add all of these other qualified professionals into the department. And so we have to change the charter in order for it to be fully integrated and fully comprehensive, because otherwise we'll have departments in the way that we do now where it gets piecemealed. For example, you may have heard of the Office of Violence Prevention that is currently in the health department. It's a great initiative that has a lot of wonderful potential. They've really been making magic happen on a shoestring budget, and it's been completely unsustainable. In order to make it what we need it to be, and actually to make it an integrated and comprehensive response, then we need it to also be a part of a Department of Public Safety. And so it is no longer 1961. We get to make what used to be and what currently is impossible, we get to make it possible. And it really just means we have to update the charter. So some of you are like, I've heard this sounds great, it sounds amazing, but I heard that what you're all doing is really just trying to abolish the police or defund the police. And the reality is, no. It's been a talking point from our opposition, who has really been stirring up this disinformation very purposefully to make us all afraid of one another. And it's just not grounded in reality. The fact is that this is and always has been about expanding public safety in the city of Minneapolis so that folks have more of what they need to keep one another safe. And that means that we get to use all of the tools in the toolbox, and that includes police officers. That is the reality of what this change does. And so I am incredibly grateful for all of you. Oh, it looks like we did update the slide. Okay, so I am actually going to stop screen share and I am going to pass it to MJ, I do believe, right? MJ, yeah, there you are. Okay, I'm going to pass it to MJ, one of our dynamic organizers. And I just want to give a quick reminder before I do pass to MJ, we are going to take questions. So please pop those questions into the chat. We'll take them after MJ and Veronica do a quick presentation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and sharing space with us. So my name is MJ. I'm one of the organizers at Yes for Minneapolis, and I want to give a brief overview of our canvassing program, name some volunteers who are doing this work for us, why volunteer, and how to volunteer. So first of all, our canvassing program. We have weekend door knocks every Saturday at 11 a.m. and every Saturday at 2 p.m. And we also have Sunday door knocks at 1 p.m. And then we have weekday phone bankings, Monday through Thursdays at 5 p.m. So those are our designated shifts. But if you would like to canvass and phone, but you can't quite come to our designated shifts, we are more than happy to support you in creating your own schedule. And we have Adia, who just dropped the link to search how to sign up for any one of the things that I had mentioned. And you can also support us, obviously, if you can't do any of these by donating or picking up a yard sign if you're not comfortable doing direct voter engagement. And other ways to help us is to talk to voters to where community members already go, like yourself, like the nearest grocery stores, community events, or parks to you. All right, so to name some of the volunteers that are doing this work with us, someone like Sydney, she signed up to phone bank every Wednesday, and she has pre-signed up for until November 2nd. Someone like Allie, she signed up to door knock, but her own neighborhood, and she is doing that every weekend until November 2nd. People like Andrew, Jack, and Rachel, they've signed up to door knock every weekend until November 2nd as well. But But then someone like Chris Superval, he signed up to door knock his own neighborhood every weekend. And then eventually he wants to add weekday phone banking starting mid-October. So these are the kinds of passionate volunteers who are working with us today and until November 2nd. So why volunteer? It's really the best way to connect with community members. It's how we best persuade and reach people who are undecided, either because they haven't heard much about ballot question 2 in the Department of Public Safety, or, as Janae mentioned earlier, because they've read oppositional mailers and maybe they're confused and they're left with a lot of questions. So you are their chance to clarify some of those confusion. And secondly, it's how we best turn out people who would actually be supportive or already are voting yes on question 2. But as we know, as you may or may not know, participation during municipal elections is very low, unlike in presidential elections. So folks just need a little reminder that we have something historical in our hands. And lastly, it's how we best make sure that we're following through on our mission, since collecting over 22,000 signatures, which put us on the ballot, and that mission being to allow Minneapolis residents, regardless of race, class, gender, ability, or zip code, to vote on the future of our public safety. And so if any of those sound good to you, please volunteer with us. We have a range of ways to help out, and you are more than welcome to reach out to me personally. I'm dropping all of those information in the chat again. Again, my name is MJ, and thank you for sharing space. And I hope that you find the time to volunteer with us or spread the word to your friends and family who would be interested in doing any of these things. And I'll pass it to Veronica.
Thank you, MJ. Yes, please volunteer with us. Our organizing team is also just really cool and fun to hang out with. So that as well. And I'm going to talk today about another way that you can help us expand public safety. So that is by joining what is called our Amplifier Network. And this is what we use to kind of lead the conversation that we're having about this Department of Public Safety. And what it is you see on the side here is you can sign up to get like the latest messaging toolkits and guidelines on what to say in a powerful way about a Department of Public Safety that moves people to that yes vote. So Adia has sent a link in the chat, which is our sign up form for Amplifier Network, and you'll get weekly emails that have, like I said, toolkits, guiding points, sample posts that you can share about this Department of Public Safety. Our focuses are social media, especially social media apps that you wouldn't always think of, but that need a little bit more of that positive messaging, like Nextdoor and Facebook. You'll get actually a guide on how to join Nextdoor and post about this department in a positive way there. And then you'll also get the option to write an LTE for us, a letter to the editor. Oh, sorry, that's my cat. A letter to the editor is just, it's something you submit to your local newspaper. And we definitely need to get the word out about this Department of Public Safety in a positive way. So that is a great way to show people that they can vote yes and expand public safety.